Hello, welcome to the first ever episode of the Fosgail Mindset. I am your host, Myka Kennedy Stevens, founder and CEO of Fosgail. It's been 2 years since I launched my coaching and consulting firm, and so it is very exciting to be stepping into the podcasting space. Thank you for giving me a few moments of your valuable listening time. Before I launch into the main content for this episode, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about this podcast and what you can expect from this episode as well as future episodes. First, it's called the Fosgail Mindset because I'm planning to cover content that focuses on awareness, attitudes, and practices that help cultivate professional well-being. After writing and publishing my book on integrated library planning, which is available from the ALA store, and a link will be in the show notes, I began reflecting more deeply about the shift in mindset that happens when moving away from traditional strategic planning and toward a more integrated planning approach. This is what inspired me to explore the elements of an open mindset that lend itself to leading and managing in fields and organizations that are experiencing intense change and transition. Fosgail is the Scottish Gaelic word for open, and I intentionally chose this as the name for my coaching and consulting firm because of the importance of openness in mindset when it comes to healthy organizations and professional well-being. My background is in librarianship, and I worked as a library director for 9 years before launching Fosgail, and this experience only deepened my appreciation for openness. Open communication, open access publishing, open source software, open door policies. These are all aspects of openness that I have embraced over my career and wanted to carry with me into coaching and consulting. So that's the why behind the name, the Fosgail Mindset. And that's also a quick rundown of the purpose of this podcast. Over the next 12 months, I'll be exploring the theme Cultivating Connection and Purpose. So this is the theme I've selected for all of Fosgail's content through March of 2026. You'll find that the topics we explore in this podcast will complement what you find in our blog, our newsletter, and in the topics we'll be discussing in the Fosgail community. With this theme, Cultivating Connection and Purpose, I plan to dive into dimensions of awareness, attitudes, and practices that help us build meaningful connections and infuse our work lives with a greater sense of purpose. The podcast episodes over this next year will follow one of two formats. Some episodes will be audio monologues like this one, in which I share some reflections on the month's focus from the Fosgail blog. Other episodes will be interviews with various professionals, librarians, educators, coaches, just to name a few. And we'll be in conversation about topics relating to the month's focus. I'm really looking forward to introducing you to these guests in the coming months. Now, our first thematic focus of the year is intentionality, specifically how purposeful actions can set the tone for meaningful connections. I chose this as the focus for this month because it seemed appropriate, given current events in the world, especially in the United States. Chaos and uncertainty are all around us. It's in the burgeoning of spring, as those of us here in the Northern Hemisphere are experiencing the transition from colder weather and shorter days to warmer weather and longer days. It's in erratic and extreme weather patterns that we're experiencing as the Earth's climate changes. It's in our social and political systems as extremist thought and isolationist strategies take hold across the globe. And it's also in our professional worlds as economic volatility threatens budgets and livelihoods. The stress from all of this can be overwhelming. Fight, flight, and freeze are our go-tos. They're at the forefront of our minds when we're confronted with chaos and uncertainty. How do we break this cycle of stress and open ourselves to respond to chaos with calm? When we're experiencing so much uncertainty, our limbic brain goes into survival mode. This is what triggers the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response that's associated with stress and trauma. When we find ourselves in this state, we are highly reactive to the situation that we're in. It makes it incredibly difficult to do anything different. And that's when we find ourselves lashing out at our coworkers when things don't go as we expect them to, or when we start ignoring emails and avoiding tough conversations, when we withdraw completely and shut down, or when we go to extreme efforts to attempt to placate everyone around us. When we're self-aware enough to see that this is happening, we might find ways to ground ourselves emotionally that allow us to look at the situation more calmly and objectively. But then what? Where do we go from there? Introducing an attitude of intentionality at times like this can make a tremendous impact on our ability to flip our brains from being in a reactive space to a more responsive space. Intentionality reminds us of our purpose and our goals. It reminds us of what we are hoping to achieve, of the changes that we're hoping to effect. And it invites us to stop and think of what action will help us move forward toward that goal, toward that change. It's an opportunity to ground ourselves in an intentional action. I have a few suggestions of practical ways to introduce intentionality in your work life. First, start small. When feeling overwhelmed, try taking a deep breath or go on a walk. These are simple actions that can help reset your mind and your body. Second, reflect intentionally. When faced with uncertainty, stop and ask yourself, what outcome am I hoping for? What action will help me move closer to my goal? Third, act deliberately. Choose one specific action that's aligned with that intention that you've identified in your reflection. When you've found that action, take it immediately. And if you can't take it immediately, make plans to take action as soon as possible before you lose hold of it. And finally, fourth, celebrate your progress. Acknowledge that even small steps forward are still steps forward. They help reinforce intentionality as a habit. They help ingrain intentionality as part of your attitude and outlook. I'd like to share a couple of stories with you about how intentionality has affected my ability to handle uncertainty and change. I have been meeting with a friend for virtual coffee breaks once a month since the last U.S. presidential election results were announced. It started off as an opportunity to catch up after not having talked for several months, and it just so happened that the time that worked for both of our schedules was a few days after the election. What we realized when we talked that day was just how important it is to stay connected to people, to friends, to neighbors at an individual level. Facing the chaos and volatility of a Trump presidency, we agreed to continue meeting regularly for virtual coffee breaks as a way to stay in touch, to have someone to check in with, to share experiences with, and to help each other make sense of what's happening in the world. it's been a way for me to practice an attitude of intentionality that keeps me connected to someone outside of work and my immediate family, and instead of retreating entirely into a bubble constructed of rom-com novels and home improvement shows. Reflecting on my career in librarianship, I can see how intentionality has helped keep me grounded in times of uncertainty, particularly during my last few years as a library director. Those years were fraught with uncertainty. It came from declining enrollment, turnover in the school's administration, the COVID-19 pandemic, which we all experienced as uncertainty, and then an institutional merger with a university. If it hadn't been for integrated library planning and the monthly review cycle that I had in place, it would have been very easy to react to every twist and turn, every crisis, to make decisions out of desperation. Fortunately, the planning processes I had in place helped me to frame challenges and uncertainty as part of a larger narrative. It provided me with space to make intentional adjustments to address urgent needs while not pivoting too much that I lost sight of the library's larger goals. Now, at this point, you might be saying to yourself, okay, setting intentions is a fine place to start, but what happens when I fail to follow through? Aren't I going to feel worse than before? Isn't it better to just not set intentions? Well, setting intentions is slightly different from adopting an attitude of intentionality. When we set intentions, we might do so without a clear plan. Or if you're like me, intentions might reflect ideals that may or may not be realistically achievable given life circumstances. However, when adopting an attitude of intentionality, it's less about setting our minds to something and trying to do it, and more about opening yourself to the awareness of what is happening around you, what's happening within you, reflecting on a path forward, and taking the next step deliberately with a sense of purpose. When adopting an attitude of intentionality, taking the next step towards your goals and sense of purpose becomes clearer. We can move past our instinctual survival responses of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn to better understand the chaos and uncertainty around us, offering ourselves the chance to effect long-lasting positive change. I hope you've enjoyed this reflection. If you did and would like to engage in further conversation, I invite you to join the Fosgail community. It's a membership platform that provides a space for discussion, encouragement, inspiration, and support. The always open, forever free tier is open to anyone who is looking for a safe and supportive space to explore the challenges of leadership in uncertain times and cultivating professional well-being. I hope to see you there. I also encourage you to sign up for Fosgail's newsletter, Field Notes. It goes out monthly and includes prompts for reflection, the latest from our blog and podcast, upcoming opportunities, and behind-the-scenes miscellanea and news from the Fosgail team. Links to join the community and sign up for our newsletter are in the show notes. Thank you again for joining me for this episode on intentionality. Please subscribe to our podcast using your favorite podcast provider so that you can continue to receive new episodes as we drop them. Until next time, I hope you find open possibilities.